I was once just like you, with a decent job in the city. But for years, that life never made me feel like I belonged. The heavy burden of taxes, mortgage, electricity, and internet bills, monthly car payments or exorbitant rent. If at the end of the month, there was no money left for myself, then I was just a tool in someone else's system, working to build their beautiful life. So I didn't want to continue down that path anymore. This is Michael's inner monologue. It's also the story of a new generation of Alaska natives. This river in front of him is a spot Michael marked, because here, he once found the largest buck he'd ever seen in his life. His mission today was to successfully hunt a 1,000-pound moose in the last 2 days of hunting season. That way, no matter how harsh the coming winter might be, he could rest easy. Michael is 37 years old. For a long time, he has lived the life of a nomad. When he was just 20, he had already come to Alaska. After that, he was deployed to Iraq 3 times. Later, he returned to Alaska to study. Slowly, the majestic land of Alaska taught him how to know himself and helped him overcome his own challenges. Finally, this young man chose to return to the wilderness, living a carefree, nomadic life. The Kulkana River, a place named in the Athabaskan language. Because this year's climate was unusually warm, the moose seemed reluctant to come down the mountain. While waiting for the moose, Michael took the time to examine the outboard motor that seemed a bit off. Experience told him, when a machine isn't acting right, unless you thoroughly inspect it, you'd better not start it. That way, you could avoid causing more serious mechanical damage. Everything happened too fast. Although Michael successfully shot the moose with 1 bullet, he still took a moment to calm himself down. For animals, most mountain people maintain an attitude of respect, just as they respect the land beneath their feet. After all, it's the land that sustains them. In front of him was a very large, standard buck. From the fresh red bullet hole, it was clear this shot was extremely precise. Looking at this massive creature, Michael felt a deep sense of pride. Not for his marksmanship, but for Alaska's unique resources. This wasn't some factory-farmed cow, fed on genetically modified corn. Its soul never respected. From birth until slaughter, the moose he had just killed was strong and healthy. It had lived a free life. Now it was offering its body to him. So as a hunter, Michael also had to follow the traditions of the indigenous people and sincerely thank the land beneath his feet and the prey before him. When everything was done, next came 6 to 7 hours of butchering and carrying. That night, until very late, Michael was still working under his headlamp, butchering this massive creature. Looking at enough moose meat to last him the whole winter, he couldn't help but feel a little dazed. Not long ago, he was just one of the countless workhorses in the city, but his meager salary couldn't possibly sustain the life he was supposed to have. He didn't know how much such a deer would be worth in the city, but it didn't matter. At least every day in the mountains, he was happy. After returning to camp, the next day, Michael was already ready to go home. He had gotten the moose he wanted. There was no point in staying any longer. Taking the opportunity, he checked the faulty motor. His time in Iraq had left him with physical injuries, but also taught him many skills. The whole repair took about half an hour. Now it was time to test the results. Now that the motor is fixed, it's time to pack up camp. That's how it is in Alaska. You can't just grab a suitcase and go, even for a simple hunt. The gear you need to bring is several times heavier than what tourists carry. As a nomad, Michael hasn't found a place he'd call home yet. Alaska's vast land offers ever-changing scenery, which he truly enjoys. Maybe someday, this wandering man will find a spot worth settling down. Once everything is loaded onto the small boat, another journey begins. With a fully loaded boat, there's no time to admire the scenery. The river is filled with floating trees, oddly shaped boulders, rushing currents, and occasional shallow spots. The sudden white water ahead means a big rock is lurking below. If you accidentally hit it, well, take a swim, buddy. After a long trek, Michael safely returned to his temporary home, where a delicious venison dinner awaited him.
Anytime I go out on a hunt,
A few sharp gunshots shattered the forest's silence, startling all the prey. Everyone wondered which brother had met his end. But in reality, Michael was just testing his gun. Perhaps a habit from his time in Iraq, he liked to calibrate his sights before heading out, whether hunting moose or just a few grouse. He always believed a weapon personally adjusted was the only one he could trust. Michael's temporary home was in Delta Junction, about 70 miles from Fairbanks, where two rivers met. The area was rich in small game. Today, he set out to hunt grouse for a change. After days of eating smoked meat, even his molars couldn't take it anymore. Just entering the forest, Michael spotted snowshoe hare tracks and a wild roseberry pecked open by a grouse. This season, grouse often searched for leftover autumn fruits in the bushes or birch tree buds. As he walked slowly, a sense of contentment washed over him. Once, he was just a poor kid with a fly fishing rod, a mountain bike, and a shotgun. Though he had nothing, he ran through the hills happily. The simpler the life, the more fulfilling it felt. The unpredictability of the forest was what he loved most. You never knew what awaited around the next corner. When he heard faint grouse calls, Michael quickly began his imitation act. Deceiving deer was common among hunters, but tricking grouse was rare. Unlike deer hunting, Michael preferred a shotgun for birds. They didn't give you much time to aim when they took off. After stopping and starting, he'd walked about 6 or 7 miles. Though the snowy mountain scenery was enchanting, an empty stomach left no room for appreciation.
see a grouse right here.
Who would have thought? Every time he bagged prey, it was under such sudden circumstances. Fortunately, Michael's marksmanship was solid. To save money, he always bought secondhand goods from others, like shotgun shells. He got 20 for $1.75. A great deal. Meaning today's cost was just a few cents, plus 7 miles of hiking, and he got a 0.5-pound grouse. Looking at the grouse in front of him, Michael recalled his days in Maine. His grandmother always loved sitting in her chair, basking in the sun. He'd spend the whole day in the woods, hunting a grouse to bring back, then suddenly appear before her, lifting the grouse to scare her. Those were his unforgettable childhood memories. That's why grouse remained his favorite land bird. Knowing one grouse wouldn't fill his frying pan, Michael found a scenic cliff outside, built a fire right there, and made a not-so-delicious roasted chicken. In Alaska's wilderness, the most direct way to get food was to venture into the woods and outsmart the animals. The grouse, being one of the easiest small animals to hunt in the forest, was like fast food in the city. All you needed was a simple cue and a swipe of your card to get a filling meal of fries and a burger. For Michael, the grouse was his version of fast food in the woods, hiking 7 miles to this breathtaking cliff, building a fire, and cooking it on the spot. That was his way of life. This was undoubtedly the toughest canoe in American history. Designed and built by an Indian, Iraq War veteran, moose hunter, dog sled driver. Me, Michael. This was my indigenous identity. This was my mission. I don't want to criticize the designers. Some things were well-intentioned, but just didn't work in Alaska. Some products were over-designed, losing the performance they should have had. This homemade little boat was strong and light, and most importantly fast. After building this canoe, Michael confidently made the above statement. It seemed he really had something going for him. As a Mi'kmaq Indian, Michael always followed tradition, using canoes for hunting and migration. But after his last moose hunt, he suddenly realized his boat was too small and slow to make a big splash in the spring hunt. Michael started from scratch, creating this 2-part boat mold. It looked like a boat, but was actually made of 2 parts. Next, Michael used the so-called cold mold process to handcraft a canoe, a blend of tradition and high-tech. He borrowed traditional ideas and got his hands on some modern materials, trying to power it with a fuel-efficient outboard motor. Durability and quality were Michael's priorities. Putting on his mask, he began mixing resin. The two branches in front of him, the blue one provided strength, the clear one provided flexibility. As for their ratio, and the more detailed secret recipe, even if you were a fancy SVIP member, you wouldn't get to see it. In Michael's own words, not even his mother knew what ingredients he put in. Each layer of resin had a different formula. As he worked inward, the flexibility of the mixed resin changed accordingly. This ensured the boat stayed elastic upon impact, absorbing energy, so it wouldn't shatter at the slightest touch. Michael really loved this work environment. With no one watching over him, no surveillance cameras in the corner, checking if he was slacking off. His mind was clear, fully immersed in the boat-making process. No pressure, no fatigue at all. Hours later, when the boat stabilized, the resin had fully penetrated the fabric. It was time to test the results. If the mold came off smoothly, the job was mostly done. Now, the edges of the hull needed the most care. The fabric was completely hardened by the resin, sharp to the touch. A single touch would leave a cut. The canoe was about 22 feet long, a size Michael specifically modified, not available locally, so it was likely the only one of its kind in Alaska. Next, he smoothed out the rough edges, polishing the boat to perfection. Finally, he painted it. When everything was done, the last step was installing the metal bow plate. This steel lump was co-designed by Michael and a local blacksmith. Once securely attached to the bow, that was the scene at the beginning. Michael was over the moon, but whether it worked depended on its performance in the water. After all that effort, if it turned out to be just a pretty face, that wouldn't do. Luckily, near Michael's home, there was a small river that didn't freeze in winter, perfect for testing the boat.
22 foot long, 60 inches wide. It's just a
Moose toboggan created for bouncing down rocky rivers with a boat full of meat or fish.
turned so nicely and just smoothly running this river.
Amid Michael's startled cry, two dogs pulled a mountain bike, racing swiftly through the jungle. This winter's snowfall had been light, so sleds couldn't run on such ground. Yet these strong sled dogs were bursting with energy. Michael had no choice but to come up with this clever idea. A day earlier, he had already set out to clear the jungle paths, cutting down many unstable trees for safety. In the US, people get killed by falling trees every day. Michael didn't want to tempt fate. The first group for today's training were the two most disobedient dogs. They were much larger than ordinary dogs. Looking at these hefty fellows, most dogs wouldn't stand a chance. An hour later, when Michael returned to camp, the other dogs started barking restlessly. They'd been cooped up for 3 days. Clearly, they all wanted to run. This time, Michael took the youngest, most inexperienced dog, along with its parents, forming a small team of 3. Now, enjoy Michael's latest work, titled, My Sled Dogs.
This puppy has good focus. It's very rare for a dog to be this young and to be this focused on being a sled dog. And every time I run this puppy, he's gonna get a little bit more focused and he's gonna put all his energy to good use. Good dogs.
Michael had been prescient. Just 2 days later, heavy snow fell locally. Finally, sledding was possible. But Michael knew his sled was no longer sturdy. Made entirely with mortise and tenon joints, it had been violently pulled by those rowdy sled dogs for so long. Now it was nearly falling apart. What to do? Of course, build a new one. Just look at those dogs' expressions. Each brimming with energy, extraordinarily destructive. If they didn't get a new sled, it might collapse halfway through the run. Luckily, Michael was prepared. He'd already gathered all the materials. These thin wooden strips weren't very thick, but they were over 4 meters long, perfect for making sled runners. As for the detailed process, we won't go into that here. Twilight clouds, stars hanging low, 2 days flew by. Michael finally finished his sled. It stretched 3.5 meters in total, ideal for hauling cargo. Transporting a North American reindeer would be effortless, not to mention firewood collection, fishing gear, and travel essentials. Next, this sleep-deprived middle-aged man finally gave in to rest. He'd test the sled in the morning. At dawn, Michael first fed his sled dogs. Today, he selected the 3 strongest, most unruly dogs for the test run. Primus, Nupe, and Saron were the 3 toughest in the pack. Since there was no rush, these 3 should suffice. Once all 3 were harnessed, the moment of truth arrived. Though a minor mishap occurred, Michael reacted swiftly and jumped off in time. That day, he tested the sled extensively. It proved remarkably durable. The 3 dogs' energy was also released effectively. Now, the next step could proceed. After nearly a whole winter, Michael's moose meat was finally running low. Hunting a North American reindeer became the top priority. Now, with an 8-dog sled team, he had traveled all day. He'd always wondered why Michael's sled dogs were all so plump. Only after seeing their dinner did he understand the reason. Eat midnight snacks every day, and you'll get fat too. When some dry straw was spread on the snow, the whole team curled up there for the night. This wasn't Michael's first time camping out. A week earlier, he had taken his dog team on a long training trip, preparing for reindeer hunting season. Back then, the entire team was loaded onto a pickup truck, starting from the Alaska Highway, traveling all day, only reaching tiny Donnelly Lake, 60 miles away, by nightfall. That night, they camped simply by the lake. The next day, Michael even went fishing. He rarely fished, but for ice fishing, a rod was optional. A small branch would do. Fish moved slowly in winter, requiring immense patience. The weather that day wasn't great. A thin ice mist covered the lake, like a fairyland. Though the scenery was stunning, staying in the fog for long was bitterly cold. Late into the night, Michael had no luck. Just as he was about to give up, his fishing line finally twitched.
Ooh, there we go. Got a big one.
A beautiful trout. Life is truly unpredictable. Michael had already packed up to leave. According to his plan, the training goal for this trip had been achieved. Meanwhile, the ice mist on the lake grew thicker. Visibility dropped significantly, a usual sign of an approaching storm. But with a fish caught, at least dinner was secured. This marked a perfect end to the long trek. Fast forward a week. After a night's rest, Michael set off again for the reindeer hunting grounds. He took a small tumble, even flipping the sled. But this time, the sled dogs weren't to blame. Sometimes, wind-blown snow piles up on the ground, freezing into hard concrete-like mounds. When the sled hits one, it's like crashing into a rock, easily overturned. Luckily, Michael wasn't hurt. After a while, they reached Fish Lake, about 5 miles from Michael's destination. The lake's surface was relatively flat, making travel safer. Later that day, they camped right at the lake's edge. Michael planned to stay there for a week, until he bagged a reindeer. As a nomad, he often stayed in one place for 10 days or more. Not only the dogs, but he himself had grown accustomed to and enjoyed this life. For a long time, Michael either drove the sled team out to hunt reindeer or wandered the woods on snowshoes. Every day, he'd wake up, head out, and return at dusk. Endless physical activity. He didn't like staying too long in one place, because as comforts and prey accumulated, life became easier and more comfortable, which only bred complacency. Regrettably, after about a week, Michael found no reindeer nearby. He'd likely missed the migration. With only 1 day's food left, he knew it was time to leave, or resort to dog food. Though disappointed, they all understood. This was real hunting. You could never predict what lay ahead. Maybe a herd would cross their path on the way home. Who knew? But either way, stick to the plan. Take what life gives, enjoy it. If life gives nothing, just keep pushing through the dark. Brighter days would come. On the outskirts of Fairbanks, there was a small yard where two city-weary souls lived. The man, Chris, and the woman, Jessie. A loving couple dreaming of moving 100 miles into the mountains, becoming true off-gridders. But first, they needed wilderness training. Today's goal? Hunt grouse in the hills. Like grabbing fast food in the city, except they had to hike far to reach the woods. After switching to their favorite mountain bikes, they entered the forest. No luck at first, but after checking several groves, they finally spotted a grouse on a branch. Jessie was still a novice with the bow, and Chris had left his gun in the car. Now, with one bird, each had their own thoughts. Chris regretted not bringing the gun. Jessie worried about missing, and the grouse thought, I don't believe it.
All right, 3, 2. Ow! Damn! I lost the arrow and I didn't get the bird.
The grouse was right. Now the arrow was gone. The bird was gone, and Jessie had hurt her arm. But the day wasn't over yet. They wouldn't return empty-handed. Hours passed as they searched. Chris now carried his gun, while Jessie, growing impatient, vented her frustration on trees. She hoped a startled grouse would reveal itself. Disappointment was normal, but not eternal. Just as they turned to leave, a break came. Her archery skills were lacking, but the grouse hadn't flown far. If she wasn't mistaken, it perched on a nearby tree. With the target confirmed, Chris stepped in.
First shot, he's gonna be the backup.
Otherwise, night would fall. Chris sighed. He hadn't wanted to fire, but his wife's aim was poor. At least they had meat now. And the lost arrow? A $16 loss. Jessie winced, but growth came at a cost. With practice, she'd avoid such waste in the future. A city girl raised without survival skills, Jessie relied only on urban know-how. And online tips. How she'd bridge these worlds remained to be seen. With a single snip of the scissors, a thin but sturdy branch fell. Watching the confident pair, combined with their goal of catching fish, you'd think they just wanted to make a simple fishing rod. That's what I thought too. But Chris, what's with the fork in your hand?
How's it feeling?
I think it feels like I'm gonna catch a fish.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah.
As a couple escaping city life, Chris and Jessie had begun preparing for their mountain retreat. To avoid starving in their inherited mountain cabin, they first wanted to catch fish for food. Reliable sources said a nearby stream had pike and whitefish year-round, plus a few burbot. Now, one held a fork, the other a bow. Surely they'd catch some fish. How to describe this scene? Like holding a badminton racket and a tennis ball in front of a ping-pong table. You can play, but the difficulty is self-inflicted. After Jessie's archery during the grouse hunt, the outcome was predictably disappointing. That day, though they caught nothing, Chris knew fish well. He suggested returning at night with a light to attract them. So they went home for dinner and came back after dark. Patiently waiting, Chris soon spotted a target.
I got something. Come on. I got a big one.
What?
When he stabbed a tree stump with all his might, Jessie couldn't help laughing. Even their beachside son got roped in. Of course, the fork, nearly impaling the stump, had to be yanked out. The day's farce ended there. No fish caught? No big deal. Happiness mattered most. Back at their Fairbanks cabin, the next day, they packed supplies for further mountain preparations. As for fishing, they'd try again tonight. First, they vacuum-sealed some salmon and moose steaks. Emergency rations. While waiting for nightfall, They harvested carrots from the garden. In Alaska, vegetables cost more than meat. They'd can all the carrots. For long-term storage, these homemade jars would likely be their year-round vitamin source. Canning was simple. Wash, pack, seal, then boil the containers to kill bacteria and preserve food for years. As the pressure cooker worked, Chris's phone kept ringing. Better chat with friends now. No signal in the mountains. Later that evening, they returned to the stream. This time, wiser, they brought fishing rods, and some stinky smelt as bait. They argued for a while, but Jessie lost, pinching her nose to hook the bait. Early next morning, returning to their spot, they found the water level had dropped. When the first hole was pried open, the hook beneath the ice was empty. Even the bait had been eaten.
Holy cow.
Shut up, love!
After 2 days' effort, they finally got a gift fish, one that didn't even touch the bait, a big fish and a small one, dangled neatly on the hook. But Chris and Jessie weren't greedy. A fresh fish for variety was plenty. They hoped to serve it as their first mountain meal. For Jessie, living wasn't just about eating full. Attitude mattered most. That's why a tiny fish could make them so happy. Some live to eat, others eat to live.